Whether your game needs quests, dialogues, or both, Narrative Pro ships with really good quest and dialogue tools. By the end of this video, you will have the quest you see here on screen. We're going to show you how to make cinematic shots, facial animation, make quests, and show you how the save system just magically saves the entire world and your quest progress, and much, much more in this video. Basically everything you need to know about quests and dialogues. This video starts where the install guide leaves off, so if you haven't watched the installation guide, I'd recommend watching that because we kind of explain some of the basics of Narrative Pro in that video as well. In the installation guide, we quickly make this Tony dialogue, but if you didn't see that, if you ever want to make a new dialogue, you just want to go to Narrative and then Dialogue, and you can make the dialogue. But we'll be doing today's tutorial inside of this Tony dialogue asset. So go ahead and open up that Tony dialogue in the project. We'll use this dialogue as a base to build upon to show you all of the features in the dialogue editor. So basically how it works is you have these nodes here, which are NPC nodes, and these orange ones are player nodes. So these are things that the player can say. And they will appear from left to right. So Tony will say, "Hi, I'm Tony," and then you'll have these options, right, starting here and going here. If you click on class defaults, there are a lot of things that you can actually change here in the dialogue. So one of those, for example, is we can basically remove the dialogue shot that we had. You can see now that if I talk to our character Tony here, you can see it keeps my in-game character or my in-game camera, whatever that may be, right? Let's talk a little bit about camera shots. So if you go into the class defaults, what we did in that quick start guide is we went into the default dialogue shot and we set the medium shot. What this does is basically for all of these dialogue options, it will just use that medium shot. And that's a cinematic camera shot that will play when you start the dialogue. So if I run up to Tony, start talking to him, you can see it's creating this camera. It's pointing it at the person who is speaking. And yeah, it looks really nice. The first issue though that you will have with this approach is the dialogue shot relies on the characters being in a certain position. So if I talk to Tony in this position, you can see I'm actually blocking the camera. So one way that you might compensate for this if you really want to use dialogue shots is by using this feature called Adjust Player Transform. And if you check that box and turn that option on, what it will do is in the game, when you play, you can see it's going to adjust my player. So even if I start talking to him like here, it's actually adjusted me. Now, you can see it's not perfect. There's a little bit of head movement and stuff like that. But this largely solves most of those sorts of problems with dialogue not lining up. If you have any line of dialogue with nothing attached to it, by default, that will end the dialogue. I'm going to quickly talk about empty dialogue nodes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold Alt and click to disconnect this dialogue, and I'll drag out, and let's add another line for Tony. And we'll hook it up to the player options here. And empty dialogue nodes are very useful for routing dialogue. So here's an example, right? You want to say, "Nice to meet you" to Tony, and then once he says "you too," you want to go back here again, right? We want to be able to select these options again. To do this, you can just route backwards to an empty node, and we've got a little bit of logic that sort of reroutes the node here, which makes it look a little bit nicer. And this will basically achieve what you want. So if we compile and save now, you can see, I can say "nice to meet you." He's going to say "you too." And you can see it's now routed me back to my dialogue options. You'll also notice that by default, it grays out items that you've selected before. And this is a good time to mention that Narrative ships with a really powerful save system. And all of your quest information, dialogue information, all of that stuff is just automatically saved by the save system for you. So I want you guys to try this out. Go ahead and press the escape key. Make sure you hold shift if you're in the editor, otherwise it won't work. And you want to go to save, slot 1, and then close the game. And if you have a save in slot 1, when you hit play again, it will auto load that save. So I'm now loaded back in. It'll be a bit more obvious, like if I stand over here and save into slot 1, you can see that I'm right back over here again. It's loaded that information. And you can see that if I talk to Tony, see how those options are grayed out? The save system has successfully remembered that I've already selected these options before. The save system in Narrative Pro is absolutely amazing, and I'm going to do a separate video on it because it's very, very powerful and really deserves its own video. But just know that all of your quest and dialogue information is saved right out of the box. Next up, I'll show you another feature called free movement. Make sure that you don't have a dialogue shot selected. We're going to turn off that adjust player transform because you definitely don't want that on if you're in a free movement dialogue. So if you turn on free movement, watch what this does. This is very good for, you often see this in games like Red Dead and GTA where you can move around whilst you're in the dialogue, right? Now, one sort of caveat, you can see it's automatically selecting that line of dialogue. So you can't have a dialogue like this where it's looping back in a free movement dialogue, because what it's going to do is in a free movement dialogue, it's going to automatically select the first player response for you, right? So you definitely don't want to have a looping dialogue. I would want to disconnect that loop if I was going to make this a free movement dialogue. You can also change the display color of certain NPCs. And let's actually talk about how do you add multiple NPCs and speakers into a dialogue. So let's talk about how to do that. So in order to do that, I'm going to add a new NPC. We're going to add a character, NPC. I'm going to call this guy Jake. We'll open up Jake. And I don't really need to do anything to Jake except for I'll give him an appearance, otherwise we won't be able to see him. So I'm going to select Manny and we'll save like that. Click on the NPC spawner. And if you click on Tony, you can actually just hold the Alt key and drag out to make another spawn. And we're going to select our Jake character. So there we go. Tony and Jake should now be spawned into the game. I'm going to hit play. And here they are. I'm going to delete my save here. Sometimes you want to be a little bit careful because sometimes if you have save data, the world might not load the way you sort of expect it. So unless you need it, sometimes it can be good to not have any save data. So I'm just going to turn that off. You can see here we've got Jake and we've got Tony. You can see Jake actually doesn't have that talk option. It's grayed out because Jake doesn't have any dialogue to play. So let's make it so that Jake actually sort of joins in this dialogue with Tony. I'm going to put Jake over here. We'll sort of turn Tony in towards him as well. And if you open up that Tony dialogue, you can add a speaker, right? So we'll add another speaker. We'll add Jake as a speaker in this dialogue, right? So let's go ahead and drag out here. Add a dialogue line for Jake. We could say, don't forget about me. We can compile and save this. And now you'll see that both Tony and Jake will be characters in this dialogue, right? I can talk to Tony. And you can see Jake says, don't forget about me. And notice that the characters look at each other, right? When Jake started talking, my character actually looked at Jake. And this is just automatically handled for you out of the box. So a big sort of question is, how do I start dialogue without talking to an NPC? Sometimes you want to start dialogue, you know, for some other reason. If you ever want to start dialogue, in the player controller, you have the Tails component, and the Tails component is where all of the dialogue lives. So if we open up the narrative player controller, this is the Tails component here that's responsible for beginning quests, beginning dialogues, and all that sort of thing. So I'll show you how to manually begin a dialogue yourself. Let's just try in the level blueprint. I'll search for debug key 1, and we will search for get Tails component. This is a nice quick way of getting the local Tails component. And then we'll just do begin dialogue, and we'll select Tony. You'll notice you also get play parameters, and this defines like how the dialogue should be played. So you can actually override certain things like whether it should be free movement, whether we should stop the player's movement, and so on. So if I was to jump into the level here and press the 1 key, you can see it's going to start that dialogue, and it works really nicely. All right, so let's play around with some of these params here and just show you how these work. So for example, if I wanted to start the dialogue from this node, I can give it an ID. It's going to use this auto-generator one. It's pretty bad, but I'm just going to use that. So we'll copy that. And if I go into my level blueprint and paste that in as the start node, when the dialogue starts, it's actually going to start from this line, which can actually be quite useful sometimes. There's lots of scenarios where you might want to do that. So if I come into the editor here and press 1, you can see he says U2, right? It just starts at that line of dialogue. The speakers option is kind of a way of supplying the speakers yourself. So by default, in a dialogue, it will use whoever you've selected as the speaker, right? You select Tony, you select Jake. You can kind of override who to use as the speakers by providing them here in the play params if you want to do that. Right, I'm going to close the debug key 1 thing here. We'll close that down and we'll go back into how we were doing it before. Okay, so I've removed all that stuff from the level blueprint. I'm going to come back into Tony here. I want to show you how to add or remove things from a dialogue. This is where we'll start talking about dialogue conditions. When you make dialogue, it's often a good idea to leave the root node empty. So I'm going to do that. I'm basically just going to remove the text from this node here. And I'm going to drag out, and I'll just put it here instead. The reason I'm doing this, you'll see in a second, I'm going to make it so that Tony remembers if you've already talked to him, and I'll make him say something else. So I'm going to click on Hi, I'm Tony. For the ID, I'm going to say Tony _ initial greet. I'll show you where the dialogue gets really powerful using these conditions. So we're going to drag out, add a dialogue line for Tony, and we're going to say, hello again. And we'll connect it up to the empty node. Now, this doesn't entirely make sense because if he says hello again, you probably wouldn't say nice to meet you. But just for an example's sake, we will set this up so that he says hello again if you've already talked to him once. So what narrative does is, remember, it always goes left to right. So when the dialogue starts here, it's going to check this one. And if this is acceptable to play, it'll play this. That's not really what we want, though. We only want him to say hello again if we've already said this initial greeting before. So how do you do this? It's actually really easy. You want to use a dialogue condition. So click on the node, go down to conditions, and you want to use one that comes with narrative, and it is called has dialogue node played. Remember, because narrative remembers all the dialogue you've ever selected, you can easily ask it if a certain dialogue is ever played. So we're going to copy the ID here. We're going to copy that ID. We're going to go into our condition, and we're going to say, has the initial greeting ever played? And you can see it'll show up as a condition. So narrative is going to start at this node, and it'll go from left to right. So it's going to start here, and it's going to say, have we played that initial greeting? If we have, then we can play this, and we can go here. But if we haven't, it'll move on to the next one, and it'll play this instead, basically. So let's compile and save that, and we'll jump in and try this out. I want to run up to Tony here. I'm going to hit play. He says, hi, I'm Tony. Nice to meet you. You too. Jake says, don't forget about me. And then if we talk to Tony again, he should hopefully remember that he's met us before, right? He says, hello again. Very nice. One thing you want to be careful with the conditions is don't add them here. Make sure to add them down the bottom. You can add conditions to lines themselves, and that will let you select the right line to play. That can be quite nice. For example, if you had a male and a female character and you need to select the audio that the character says, depending on what, gender the character is, stuff like that you can do. But most of the time you want to add the condition down the bottom here. There are a whole bunch of other conditions too. Like, for example, here I can use the has item equipped condition to make him say, oh, nice gun, if you have a rifle equipped, right? So if I try talking to him, let's say I don't have my rifle on, right? You can see that the item doesn't appear, the line doesn't appear. But if I was to equip the rifle and have it on my player, nice gun. So you can see there's lots of different conditions you can use. So we've learned how to use conditions to add or remove bits of dialogue. Now we're going to talk about using events. These are great ways to sort of run a bit of logic, which you want to do all the time, whether it's starting a quest or giving the player an item. This is also really useful. So we're going to disconnect the hello again. Let's say once you've talked to him once before, he'll offer you some sort of item. That's what you want him to do, right? So I'll unconnect that, and I'll come over here. We'll say want an item. And we can drag out for the player. We can say, sure. Or we can say, no thanks. I'm going to go to the sure option. If you scroll down, you can go to events, adds an event, and you can see there's a huge amount that come with narrative. But we're going to use the add item to inventory one. This will add an item to the player's inventory. So if you come in here, for the item class, we can go ahead and give the player, let's just say, there's an item that comes with narrative called the cupcake. So we'll just select the cupcake. We'll give the player a cupcake. Why not? So if we compile and save that. So if we were to play now and walk up to Tony and talk to him, you can see, hi, I'm Tony. And if we talk to him a second time, he's going to say, do you want an item? And we can say, sure. And now if we look in our inventory, you can see we have this cupcake item, which is sort of a demo item that comes with narrative. But these events can do anything you really want. You can even make your own custom events. Let me show you how to do that really quickly as well. If you ever want to make your own custom events or conditions, you can right click, go to narrative, narrative condition, or narrative event. So let's make a custom event, for example. I'll just show you how these work. So we'll do ne underscore my custom event. And this could do whatever you wanted. It could give the player, you know, some sort of stat or some sort of attribute or just any code you want it to, really. Just override execute event. And I'm going to make it do something very silly here, but just as an example, let's just make it print a string. We'll just say my code. So this could be anything you wanted, right? We'll compile, save, and if you go back into that Tony dialog, you can actually change that event. You can see our custom event that we made should appear in here. My custom event, click on that one, compile, save, hit play, and we'll do this again. If I say sure, instead of giving the item, you can see it's going to run that custom code we made. So these events, you can make them do literally anything you want. And all of these ones that come with the plugin, you can actually look at how all of these work. So for example, let's say you want to see how that add item to inventory event works. Just go in here and search for it. Open it up. And you can see it's when the event executes, it adds the item to the player. And it can even show a little notification saying that you got the item. And conditions are basically the exact same thing, except you just want to go to narrative, narrative condition, and then you just need to override the check condition function. And you can do absolutely anything you want in here. You can check if a player has like a certain, I don't know, thing or whatever you want to check. Most of the stuff you would want to check actually comes with the plugin right out of the box, right? You can check if the player's wearing a certain item or has a certain level, or even check if there's a certain time of day right now. Maybe you only want the NPC to say a certain line if it's nighttime. You don't have to follow this step where I show you how to make facial animations, but if you do want to do this part, you need to grab the MetaHuman plugin. This is made by Epic Games themselves, and just make sure you install it to Unreal Engine 5.5. I'll put the link in the description. This is the plugin that actually generates the facial animations for us. And make sure that in the project you go to Edit, Plugins, and if you click on MetaHuman, you can see here it is here, the official MetaHuman Unreal Engine Toolkit. Enable that, and then you can restart the project. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about here with the dialogues is how do you make dialogue, facial animations, and play audio and stuff like that. So if you followed the tutorial, you want to have done the step where you add Oscar into the project, the MetaHuman. That's all covered in the quick start guide. So make sure you have Oscar added. And then what we're going to do is we'll just come into, we'll just back it in the content for now. Just go to MetaHuman Animator, make a MetaHuman performance. I'm going to call it MHP underscore Oscar. Open it up. And then what you want to do is change input type to audio. This is going to let you do something really cool. Basically, you can say whatever you want and it'll just make a facial animation out of it. And actually, you can record audio in Unreal Engine. A lot of people don't know this, but if you go to Windows, Cinematics, Take Recorder, and then add a source, microphone audio, this will let you record your actual audio. So I'm going to do a recording here. Hi, nice to meet you. Okay, right, so I've recorded that. And it should be saved to cinematics, takes, and then it'll be in here. If you go into the audio folder, there's our audio. I can play this. Hi, nice to meet you. So if we go into Tony's dialogue here, he says, hi, I'm Tony. So let's go ahead and record, hi, I'm Tony. Hi, I'm Tony. Right, so we've done that. Let's go back into the Tony dialogue. And if you click on it, you can actually see it says dialogue sound, and you can select the one that we just recorded, which it'll be in here, cinematics, takes. Hi, I'm Tony. You can see there it is there. I'm just going to rename it Hi, I'm Tony. And then you can just select it for dialogue sound, right? If we compile and save this, now if I go and talk to Tony, it'll actually play that audio for us, right? So I'm going to talk to Tony. Hi, I'm Tony. Right, but there's no facial animation. So how do we add facial animation? Come back into that MHP Oscar and under audio, hi, I'm Tony. Right. Click on process. Click on export animation. And I'll just put it in the content thing here. I'm just going to say A_, hi, I'm Tony. Just use all the defaults here, click on create. And now in our content browser, we have a facial animation. Open that up, look at that. Amazing, right? And what you will have to do with narrative is right click on it and make a montage out of it. And you can come into Tony here and select that facial animation. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm going to select that. Now, the problem with Tony right now is he does not have a face, so it's not going to be able to play the facial animation. But if you go into Tony's NPC definition and go to appearance, you can actually change him to use Oscar's appearance, and then he will have a face for the animation to play on. So let's do that. We'll hit play. There is a little bit of a lag as it's loading in Oscar. Now, in a packaged game, this will actually show a loading screen, so don't worry about this. But in the editor here, you will actually see him pop in. So we've selected our audio, right? I'm going to run up to Tony and watch this. Hi, I'm Tony. Unbelievable. This is cutting edge technology. The fact that you can do this without, back in the day, you used to need, millions of dollars of motion capture equipment, all sorts of technology. And look at that. That's pretty good considering all that has to use is the audio. It's pretty incredible technology that we're using here. All right, so now we are going to talk about quests, and then at the end, we'll sort of tie quests and dialogues together. So in the content browser here, I'm going to right click and go to quest, and I will make a new quest called QBP_my first quest. You can have as many sort of missions or quests running at one time as you like. And in the quest here, if you go to the quest graph, this is where you sort of define how your quest works, right? What you need to do to move through the quest. And quests and dialogue also have event graphs, so you can actually run sort of blueprint code. So for example, when the quest has failed, I could, do some sort of code here that maybe punishes the player or something like that, if you want that as well. So we'll just go back into the quest graph here, and I'll show you how the quest designer works. It's extremely simple. So quests are made up of tasks, and if you drag out, you can search through the tasks. And there's one that comes with narrative, and we'll show how to make your own later. But if you hover over this one, task that completes when the player's pawn gets within a certain distance of goal location. So this one is one of the most simple tasks, and we're going to click on that one and use it. So we're going to make a very, very simple quest. I'm going to search for cube in the actors here, and I'll just drag in a cube. And let's say that our quest is that you just have to run over to this cube. So we'll keep it really simple to begin with. So we're going to copy the location of this cube. And if you go back in here and click on your branch that was added, you can see that go to location task is in there. And you have to provide it a goal location. And I'm just going to click on specified transform and just paste in the location that that cube was at. And then for friendly location name, I'm just going to say cube. And you can see now it says go to cube. So basically we've made a quest here where at quest start, you have to go to the cube and then it takes you to this new point in the quest. And actually what you can do, if I hold Alt and click to disconnect this, I could drag out and actually succeed the quest. So I can make a really simple quest here where if you go to the cube, it basically completes the quest. So let's actually do that. We'll compile and save. And you need to start the quest. It will not just automatically start. So in our case, we'll just start it when you hit play. So again, I'm going to jump into the level blueprint here and we'll just do begin play. On begin play, we're going to get the Tails component. So quests and dialogue are both handled through the Tails component. And then you could do begin quest. And then simply click on the quest that we just made, my first quest. Compile and save. The text that you write on these nodes here is not just for the designer. These will actually show up in the player's quest journal UI if you want to use that for your game. So if I put I move to the cube quest complete on this quest state, this will actually show up in the UI. So these grey nodes are quest states and these blue nodes are branches, and they are how you move from state to state. I'm just going to give this a bit of a better ID as well. We'll just give it the ID take cube and we'll give this one quest complete. So there we go. There's our quest, right? Go to the cube, and then that's the quest done. So we'll compile and save. We will hit play. And you can see it says quest started, my first quest, and it's telling me that I need to go to the cube. So you can see if I run over to the cube here, there we go. Quest succeeded, my first quest. And if you press tab and go into the quest journal, you don't have to use the quest journal, by the way, but it is here by default. And if you go into my first quest, there you go. I move to the cube, quest complete. In our quest, you can also go to class defaults and give your quest a better name. So by default, it doesn't have spaces here. So I'm just going to put some spaces. And I'm going to say our first quest. And I'm going to say our first quest with narrative as the description. If you click on the take cube and actually go into that task, you can define certain things like how close to the cube do we have to get for it to consider the task completed. So you can make it, we only have to be within 1000 units of the cube. You can even invert it. So you have to be a certain distance away from the cube for it to complete the task. There's also other things like the marker. You can change the color of the navigation marker. So I might want to make it pink. If I just compile and save that, and hit play, you can see it's now pink. And another thing you can do by default in the quest journal is you can actually define whether or not you want to track a quest right now. And out of the box, that will just remove the UI for the quest, so it won't show up on the player's HUD. You can turn that back on, and you can see the markers back. Quests can have multiple tasks per branch, so if I was to hold Alt and drag out and make another cube, and then copy the location of that cube, and come back into my quest. If I go to my task here, I can actually duplicate it. And now you can see I've got two go-to locations, and I can paste in the location of that other one. And if I compile and save, when I hit play, you can see that I have basically two tasks to complete to take this state. So I have to go to this one, and then I have to go to that one. You can also have sort of different ways of moving through a quest. So let's say that there's multiple ways of completing your quest, whatever it may be. You can just add multiple branches like that. So if I was to copy this one and put it on here instead, I'll remove it from there. You can see that this time, you guys don't have to follow this step. I'm just demonstrating here. You can now make a quest where you can go to either of these cubes in order to complete the quest. You can see if I go to either of them, it completes the quest. Or perhaps you want it so that if you go to the wrong cube, it actually fails the quest, right? So we could say wrong cube. And if we compile and save this, and we hit play, I've left the descriptions and everything the same, but you can see if I go to this one, it should fail the quest. You can see it says quest failed, my first quest. So quests actually support being failed as well. And if you go to the quest journal, you can see it's in finished quests here. And you can see the description has popped up. Wrong cube, right? So we've actually failed this quest. It is in the failed state. So using this state machine design, you can really make pretty much whatever quest you want. Like if I hold Alt and disconnect, I could make a quest where if I go to the wrong cube, I still have a chance to go to the right cube afterwards. But if I, go to the wrong cube after that, or I do some other thing after that, then it fails the quest, right? So hopefully this is making sense, right? These are points in the quest that you can be at, and these are sort of ways to move from point to point in the quest. So I'm just going to delete all that stuff and we'll just put it back to our basic quest design that we had at the start. So the editor is quite flexible and we don't really lock you into doing anything a particular way. So just as an example, I'm going to add just a random state here. You could literally make it so that if 10 seconds passes, we just jump into this state and then maybe you have to, go somewhere else in order to complete the quest. So we do make it very flexible. So I'm just going to say on this, too late, we changed the quest design. And I'll just come into the event graph here. And if we override on quest started, I'm just going to make it that 5 seconds, if you don't complete the quest within 5 seconds, the entire quest design is going to change. We're just going to throw you to this state instead. So we'll do enter state. So you can set the state manually to whatever you want. We'll just do get state. And then I believe I called it random state. So we'll do random state. And now our quest design will be quite a bit different, right? So you can see it says go to cube. But then if we wait, look at that, the quest is updated, and if I was to go into the quest journal, you can see it says too late, we've changed the quest design. And I didn't fill the move to location task out, so it will default to the world origin. But you can see here, this quest is completely changed now. I need to go here instead to complete the quest. So all I'm really trying to show you here is very, very flexible. You can essentially do whatever you want. You can also fail the quest at any time for any reason, and you can succeed the quest for any reason. So generally your quests, you will design all here. But if you really need like some flexibility or for some reason you just want to send the player straight to the quest succeeded state, you can just do that, right? We don't really lock you into doing anything. You can also use events on quest states just like you can on dialogue nodes. So if I want to give the player a certain item when they complete the quest, I can do that. So let's give the player a narrative user manual when they complete the quest, and I'll even add a notification to the screen. So if you search for show notification, we could say congratulations on finishing the quest, here's a user manual. We'll compile and save, and you can see now if I complete the quest, it says congratulations on finishing the quest, and in my inventory I now have this cool 3D readable book that appears to have some text just streaming, not loading at the moment. It might be that my computer doesn't have enough memory right now. But these are actually really cool 3D books that we ship with Narrative too. At the moment, we do not support conditions on quests, although we'd like to add them. So you can't actually add a condition to optionally remove or add parts of quests. So the last thing that I simply have to show you is how do you add your own quest tasks, because every game is going to want its own quest tasks. We do give you lots of useful ones, but usually you're going to want more than these. So let's do that. So if you go into your project settings, you just need to be mindful that we look inside blueprints/tasks for any quest tasks. So you can modify these paths and add your own if you want. But by default, it looks in there. So let's just put them in there, right? So we're going to do blueprints, tasks, and let's make our very first quest task. You can just go to narrative, task, and a quest task that we do not give you out of the box is crouching. So let's say that you want the player to have to crouch to move through the quest. We'll make a new quest task called crouch. There are two ways to basically mark the task as being completed. You can either, on begin task, you can sort of set up some sort of binding to do it with a delegate, Or you can use tick task. And a lot of people are scared of tick, but you don't have to worry. With quest tasks, they're very efficient, and it's only going to call it every, let's just say 0.5 seconds. So you can turn that interval way down. So every 0.5 seconds, we're going to check if your player is crouching, and if they are, we'll mark the task as completed, basically. So we'll get your owning pawn. We will cast you to a character, and then we're going to check if you are crouching. So is crouching. And then if you use a branch, if we're crouching, we'll do finish task. Or actually, it's called complete task. This is actually really cool. So now anyone who wants to make a quest where you have to crouch at any point in the quest, they can use your task that you've made. I'd also recommend giving it a description. So we'll just do get task description. And we'll just say crouch. Okay, compile and save that. Come back into your quest now. And if you click on that take cube, I'll keep take cube there. I'm just going to unhook it for now. But let's just say we'll use the crouch one. So it will be under uncategorized by default. So let me show you how to fix that as well. If we go to settings, I'm going to give it the display name crouch. I'm going to put it in the category movement. And I will compile and save that. And now this should be fixed. When I drag out, you can see that I have to go to movement. And there's my new crouch task. You can also give it a description, and that will show up as a tooltip. We'll say task completes when you crouch. We'll drag out, crouch, and let's actually try this out. I have not even tested this before, so hopefully I've done everything right here, but it's going to start the quest. It's saying that I need to crouch. I'm going to crouch, and there you go. And it's completed the quest. Very nice. Alright, so we're going to tie all this together now by making a basic sort of fetch quest with multiple NPCs, and this is going to help us really tie quests and dialogue together and learn how to use them. So what I'm going to do is I've made an NPCs folder. I put my NPCs in there. I'm just going to make some new ones. So we're going to make 2 new NPCs. We're going to make one called Keith, and we're going to make one called Larby. I also put my dialogue in a dialogue folder here, so I'm just going to go into that folder and d_Keith and d_Larby. So I've just made 2 NPCs and I've made a dialogue for each of them. So if you open up your Keith and Larby characters, just make sure you assign them their dialogues. So Larby and Keith. And make sure to give Keith and Larby appearances. I'm going to make them both use that Oscar metahuman character. So we'll copy that from Keith and put it in Larby as well. So they both use the Oscar appearance. They will look the same, but that's okay. I don't really want to import a second metahuman, so we'll just make them look the same. And I'm going to add a second NPC spawner to my level. So just drag one of those in. And we'll click on Create NPC Spawn. Click on the spawn and we'll select Keith. And just move Keith up so he's not clipping into the ground. We'll hold Alt on our keyboard and drag out to create another spawner. And this one, we will select Larby. And we'll move Larby a little bit further away just so you actually need to run over to Larby during the quest. The quest we're going to make is basically Keith has lent Larby his book and you need to go get the book back from Larby. So it's a pretty simple sort of fetch quest, but it's a really good opportunity to show you quests and dialogues working with each other. I just made a little quests folder here and I'm going to make a new quest. So we'll just call it Larby the Thief. That's my quest name. So the quest is going to be pretty simple, right? You talk to Keith, you need to get his book back from Larby. So the first thing you need to do is go and talk to Larby and basically get the book back. So I'll open up that Larby dialogue and I'll open up that Keith dialogue and we'll start to write the dialogue for the quest. For Keith, we're going to add a speaker. We need to add Keith as the speaker. We'll select him here. Drag out. And if you haven't started the Larby the Thief quest, we want Keith to give you that quest. So we'll say, you've got to help me, right? Keith wants you to help him, and you can either accept his quest or tell him you don't want a quest right now. So we could say, get lost. Or we could say, sure, what is it? We'll add another line for Keith here. And Keith's going to say, I want to learn Narrative Pro, but I lent Larby my user manual. Can you get it back from him? And then we'll add a line where we just say, sure. When your player says sure, we are going to start the quest. So we'll just go to events and use the begin quest event that comes with Narrative Pro. And we want to start the Larby the Thief quest, right? Now we only want Keith to give you the quest if you're not already doing the quest, right? So the way that we do that is we click on this Keith line, we go down to conditions at the bottom here, and we are going to add a condition. Is quest not started or finished? So check the not box and then select Larby the Thief. So now this dialogue will only play if you haven't either started or finished the Larby the Thief quest. Compile and save. So once you talk to Keith and you start the quest, you have to go talk to Larby. So let's write a little bit of dialogue for Larby now. We're going to go into Larby's dialogue, add a speaker to it. Larby. We'll go into the dialogue graph. Larby. Drag a line out for Larby. And we'll say Larby's a little bit angry. He goes, what do you want? And we'll say, I'm here to get Keith's user manual back. He wants to learn Narrative Pro. And Larby will say, take it, it's useless anyway. And when Larby says this line, take it, it's useless anyway, we actually want to give the player the book item, right? So we'll go to events, and we're going to do add item to inventory. And we want to add the user manual to your inventory. So we'll compile and save that. And now we need to actually build out the quest. So we'll just say for the description here, Keith sent me to get his book back from Larby. I need to talk to Larby. So what we need to do is get the book item from Larby, right? So what we're going to do is drag out, and we'll use one of the tasks that we provide you, and you'll use this one very often, and it's called Find Item. You can see it's a task that completes when the player's inventory component has an item added with the selected class. So basically, if you use that and then select the user manual, you've basically made a task now where if you get the user manual, it will complete this task. For the description override here, I'm going to say talk to Larby, because that's kind of how you get the user manual. For the main description down here, I'll say find Keith's user manual. And just to keep it clean, we'll just give it a nice ID as well. Find user manual. Once you find the user manual, you will go to a new state, and we will call this got manual. And then what you need to do is you need to bring it back to Keith, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go into Keith's dialogue, and we need to add kind of another branch of this dialogue here. And what we're going to do is drag out, add a line. We'll say, have you got my user manual back? Our player can say, sure do. Or we can say, I don't have it yet. And then he'll say, bring it back, please. If you give him the user manual, he'll say, finally, thanks again. Last time I lent Larby anything. And then that will complete the quest once he says that. And we also want to take the user manual off you because you've now given it to Keith, right? So we'll add an event. And this time we want to use the consume item event. What that will do is it will actually remove a certain amount of the item. So we're going to do user manual, and we want to consume one of the user manual, and that will take it off you. Right, so now we need to add some conditions. So he's only going to ask for the user manual back if you're actually doing his quest. So we're just going to do is quest in progress, Larby the Thief. So we only want Keith to ask for the user manual back if you do. So we only want Keith to ask for. So we only want Keith to ask about the quest if you're actually doing the quest. So we'll just come down to the bottom, conditions. We'll say is quest in progress, Larby the thief. So otherwise he won't just say that randomly. You have to be doing his quest for him to say that. And then we actually only want you to be able to say that you have the book if you do have the book, right? So we can, again, do a condition, has item in inventory, and the item is the user manual. And you can just copy that condition and put it on this one as well. And then just go down and check the not box to invert the condition, right? So if we don't have the user manual, we'll have to say, I don't have it yet. And if we do have the user manual, we'll be able to say, sure do. And then that will complete the quest. Looking pretty nice at this point. We've got a couple of good dialogues built out here. We only want Larby to ask, what do you want, if you're at this point of the quest where you have to get the book from him. So the easiest way to do that, we'll just go to Larby. We're going to do another condition here. We'll just say is quest at state. And then the name of the state here is quest start. So we'll do Larby the thief, quest start. So Larby will only inquire about the quest if you're actually at the start of it. To finish the quest off, we need to actually give the manual back to Keith. And the way we're going to do that is by selecting a dialogue line to give it back to him, right? As you can see here. I'll just give this a better ID. We'll just say give manual, right? And if you copy that ID there, come back into your quest design, drag out and go to dialogue, play dialogue node. And this is a quest task that will complete the quest task when a dialogue node plays with the specified ID. So I just paste that ID in and I do Keith. And now what will happen is when you select, or when this dialogue line plays, it will actually complete this quest task, right? I'm going to type in Keith and click on add navigation marker just to show a nice navigation marker on Keith. For the description down here, I'm just going to say bring the manual back to Keith. We'll just call it give manual. And once you do that, that's actually the quest done, right? So we can remove this and drag out and just do succeed the quest. We'll give it a nice ID like quest complete. We'll say I returned Keith's manual, quest complete. And you can add comments as well, which sometimes can be a little bit useful. So we could add a little comment there. This is more useful if you have like quite a complex quest and you want to help people understand what it's doing. Right, compile and save. And yeah, compile and save all of this stuff. And we'll give this a try. We might have an issue here. I haven't actually tested this yet, so we'll try this out. We're gonna play. Right, so if we come in here, we should be able to try this quest out by talking to Keith. You've got to help me. We'll say, get lost. Let's make sure that works. Yep. And we'll say, sure, what is it? Want to learn Narrative Pro, but I lent Larby my user manual. Can you get it back? And we can say, sure. And if we talk to Keith before we have the user manual, we can only say, I don't have it yet. And then he says, bring it back, please. So we'll go and talk to Larby and try and get his user manual back. What do you want? And we can say, I'm here to get it back. And he says, take it, it's useless anyway. And you can see in our inventory, it's added that item, which is very nice. Right, if we talk to Keith here, have you got my user manual? Sure do. Thanks again, last time I lent Larby anything. And yeah, it's all going to show up in our quest journal. Very nice. Just want to also mention that if you go to world settings and open up the game mode, in here is the player definition. And if you open that, you can change the player's appearance. So we can also make the player a metahuman by default if we want that. So if I was to hit play now, you can see I am now playing as a metahuman. And I've added some animation to some of these dialogues here.
You've got to help me.
Go back and talk to Keith.
Have you got my user manual back?
Sure do.
Finally. Ah, thanks again. Last time I lent Larby anything.
There you go. There's your very first somewhat proper quest with narrative. So before we close out here, I just want to mention a few more things. So dialogue shots can be assigned per line. They don't have to be assigned for the whole dialogue. I forgot to mention that earlier. But also, this looks way too long in the list of options that your player can select. And I didn't mention it, but option text here lets you specify a different option for the dialogue rather than the actual line itself. Hint text also lets you add a little hint to the end of the line. So if I was to type persuade as the hint text, you can see that now the line actually doesn't have the entire line in it. It has a different option text, and it also has that persuade option on the end there.
Take it.
And of course, the other thing I want to show you is that narrative saves everything. So another good example, just showing you the save system, it really does save everything. If I was to save into slot 1 here, I don't have any save data at the moment, but narrative will remember that I'm doing this quest. It will remember exactly where I am in the quest. If I restart this game here, look at that. Right back where I was. It remembers that I have that book. It remembers that I'm up to this point in the quest. It's almost like magic how easily it just handles this for you. Right? It remembers that I've got the manual. I'm right back where I was in the quest. So saving is really an afterthought in Narrative Pro. It's really awesome, but we'll do a separate video on the save system. So the last thing that I actually didn't get a chance to talk about is tagged dialogues. So often when a NPC is attacking you, you want them to, you know, shout at you like, I'm going to get you, or if an NPC sees you, they might greet you and say hello. There are kind of all these scenarios where NPCs just need to kind of play a quick tagged dialogue, and that's kind of what the tagged dialogue system is. So I'll go ahead and explain how these work. So we're going to go to our Keith character that we made, and let's say you want Keith to say to the player, hey, come help me, you know, I need your help on a quest. A tagged dialogue would be perfect for this. So we're going to go to where Keith's dialogue is, and I'm going to make, in fact, I'm just going to duplicate Keith's dialogue, and I'm going to call this Keith_greet. And if you open up Keith_greet, go into the dialogue graph, we can just delete all of this. We just want Keith to say, I need your help, come over here. And we're going to say that only if we're not doing his quest. If we're doing his quest already, or if we've done his quest before, it wouldn't make sense for him to say that. So we'll just add a condition to it. Is quest not started or finished? Larby the thief. We will compile that. And so that's sort of our greeting that we want to play. And now we need to make our tagged dialogue. So we just go to data asset, tagged dialogue set. I'm just going to say D Keith tagged dialogue. So the tag dialogue is actually really quite simple. How it works is you add a tag, which represents kind of the event, like attack, greet, investigating, stuff like that. And so we're going to make the greet tag play D_Keith greet. So when this tag is raised, when it happens, we will play this dialogue. And you do not have to use the ones that we provide here. These are just kind of some default ones that we added. You're going to want to add your own subtags for certain events. So I'm going to get rid of this one, and I'll just show you the greeting one. So greet is actually a tagged dialogue that we've already implemented for you. Basically, if you are standing near a friendly NPC, they will play that greet tagged dialogue from time to time. Make sure that in Keith's NPC asset, you assign him to the Heroes faction. This is because your player is in the Heroes faction, and by default in Narrative Pro at the moment, we only greet you if you're in a friendly faction, basically. So we're just going to make sure in Keith we've selected his tagged dialogue set. We've added that greet. And you should see this basically will work. If I stand in front of Keith, you can see he says, I need your help, come over here. The other thing is, you almost never want tagged dialogues to use camera shots. So I'm just going to open up that Keith greet, class defaults. I'm going to remove that dialogue shot. And that should basically be it. I'll also turn off auto stop movement. And you can see if I run around, he says, I need your help, come over here. And notice how he's looking at me while he says that as well. And hopefully if I was to start his quest, he would not ask for my help, you know. You could even have him say something else. You could be like, hey, get back soon with the book, or something like that if you wanted to. So that's the concept of tagged dialogues. I would highly recommend implement your own tagged dialogues. The way that you fire these tagged dialogues is you grab your NPC and there's a function you can call and it's called play tagged dialogue, and you give it the tag and the narrative system will handle playing the dialogue for you. And so if you right click on this node and click on find references, you'll see all the places in narrative where we've basically done this. So for example, you can see there's this greet check, and if you go into this greet check, you'll see that this is why Keith just greeted us when we walk up to him, because periodically Keith will check if you are near him, he will check if you are friendly, and if you are, he will play this tagged dialogue. And so if you ever want to implement your own tagged dialogues, you basically just follow what it's doing here. The only difference is you would add your own tag and select the tag you wanted to play. Alright guys, thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you need any more help, we will be around in the Discord. So I'll see you in the next tutorial.